Welcome back. You listen to the Asylum. It's me, Gunnar, in the chair of destiny, joined by CK.
Hello.
Hello. Get in touch with us tonight at the One Asylum. So simple. We've got the fantastic Marc D'Antonio on the line. Marc D'Antonio, of course, is the MUFON photographic expert and an astronomer and a genuine, all-round, incredibly cool scientist.
And he built the moon in his studio, just for fun.
Well, it wasn't the real moon.
It's good enough.
That's next week.
Mark, coming back to that, you were talking about regolith and this idea that it was a silicate-based, I guess, almost glass-like structure. It reminds me of kind of basalt and things like this on Earth. Like, we get different types of rocks based on the speed of which they cool, don't we?
That's right. And crystallization. That's right.
Crystallization. So I'm guessing what we're having here is an incredibly long cooling rock, really, that is done in a vacuum almost, or to all intents and purposes, a vacuum, creating this kind of glass-like structure. What does that mean?
Yeah, but don't forget that it's also small particles.
Yeah.
Because it's pulverized pieces of the moon, and of course the impactor that hit the moon. So that gets, we call it goes up not into an atmosphere around the moon, but we call it the exosphere. The area in space around the moon. It gets thrown out into that area, and some of it, if the bigger particles are big enough, they'll actually come back, strike the moon again, and make secondary impact features, and things like that. But or they'll make rays, these structures you see radiating away, like Copernicus crater has these rays, Tycho crater has these rays, and we'll talk about this, but we have a crater club. We 3D print these craters and then paint them up realistically, and they're like these 4-inch by 4-inch slabs, and they're the actual topographic relief, the real thing from NASA data. So these are something that we make for people that they want to get a crater, they can get a standard deluxe version.
That's your Christmas present out the
I was going to say, I can call Mark up and order a crater.
Yes.
Isn't that something? In fact, almost any crater, actually. And I talked to the USGS, the Geological Survey guys, and I've been helping them with their system just to try and make it, give them bug reports and things like that, and talk to them. And they've been very, very good to me. And I asked for, because you can only do plus 60 and minus 60 in range on the moon. So from the equator up to 60 degrees north and from the equator down to 60 degrees south. However, when I looked at the moon, I said, there's some craters I'd love to print that are actually kind of near the North Pole and South Pole. And one of the guys on their team sent me the files for the North and South Pole. So now I have those too. And it's like, thank you. This is fantastic. So it's cool stuff. But the moon is fascinating because it's our satellite in space. Now, astronomers hate the moon for one reason, and that is the light.
Yeah.
When it's approaching full, it's at full moon, it ruins shortly after sunset to just before dawn. I mean, that's the worst time for astronomers because they can't do any photography of very faint galaxies when it's there. Now, there's techniques to get rid of the light from the moon, and I use some of those, but it's not the same. But it's our nearest satellite. Obviously, it's except for these satellites that are trapped in our orbit ahead and behind us. We don't have anything orbiting us other than the moon, and so it's a fascinating topic. I talk about it a lot on P&K Space Imaging's stream. That's run by Paul and Keith. You guys, I think you know them. P&K, along with Bill New York Skywatcher, the other guy, those two guys got me into doing my Sky Tour live stream. If I didn't do Sky Tour live stream, I wouldn't know what to do. So I was recovering from surgery, actually. I had, during the surgery, I actually, they had a problem during the surgery. And unfortunately, I ended up. Now I'm not that old. I'm 57 years old. I was 56 when I had the surgery. But during the surgery, I had 6 full-on strokes, and they didn't know it. And I woke up blind and a quadriplegic.
Whoa!
Wow!
And I was like, so this is me now. So it took me a number of months to recover. And I had the surgery on and this is just an aside. But I'm getting to a point. On May 30th or so of 2015, I had that surgery. And then I was in the rehab by June 15, okay? And by, let's see, by June 20th, I told the doctor, and this was right after I took the trach. I had a tracheotomy too, so I couldn't even talk all that time. I had to do sign language. And so they took the trach out, and I told the doctor that I have to do a talk in Los Angeles in September. And he kind of raised his eyebrows and looked at me and said,
No.
"You're serious?" As if. I said, "No, I'm gonna be in Los Angeles in September. I got to do it. I'm doing a talk. There's gonna be 1,000 people there. I got to do a talk." And he's like, "Well," he says, "having goals is important." So by July 3rd, in like 3 or 4 weeks into my stay there, I was supposed to be there for more than double that time. They were sending me home because I had already gone past their recovery, strategy. Like going up a full flight of stairs, and they wanted me to do the 3 little baby ones in their little gym for rehab. I went up a full flight of stairs and came down because I was going to do that. There was no way that I was going to miss this conference. So then September rolls around, and I'm walking around in LA, and I'm walking around in this hotel in Los Angeles thinking, wow, I'm really here. I really got here. But I still needed surgery for the vocal cords because my vocal cord, I have one that's paralyzed actually. And I know there's people that wish they both were paralyzed, but that's,
I give over.
I think I wish goodness were paralyzed.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Hey, there's times, when it's helpful. But my voice, it always sounds like I have a cold when I talk now. But I don't. I mean, I don't have any sickness at all. But it just sounds it because when we have a paralyzed vocal cord, your voice gets deeper. I can do Lou Rawls. Hey, and they just. Never expected to be able to. That wasn't Lou Rawls, by the way, but I never expected to be able to do that. But
can you go all the way down to Barry White?
You'll never find. Maybe I don't know. But you have no. I don't know. You have to relearn a lot of things. I had to learn how to talk again because I couldn't talk. I had to learn how to walk again because I couldn't. So a lot of all those things, but a very very crazy experience. But the bottom line was I made my goal. I got to September's conference. I did my talk. A little raspy voice, a lot of water, but I did manage to do it, and it was good. So, and then I'm back now to the circuit. I'm going all over the place doing talks, And when I did this one up in, I did one right nearby, actually, here in Massachusetts, which I'm in Connecticut, so it's the next state north. And I did it on basically the history of the Earth. And to do it, I wanted to have a different way of doing it because I like audience participation. I don't like talking behind a podium because that's a block. That's a crutch. I mean, if you don't know what you're going to talk about, then you have notes. But if you know what you're going to talk about, then you don't need notes. It's in your head. You just do your thing. And that's how I've always operated. So I went and I said to the audience, I said, I'm going to give you an illustrated history of the Earth. And I said, and here's how I'm going to show it to you. And I held up a roll of toilet paper. I said, I wrote out on this piece of toilet paper, and this roll of toilet paper, which is 117 feet long, I wrote out the entire history of the Earth, all right, from the time it formed to where we are in this room today. And I'm going to show you just what the Earth's history looks like visually. And they looked at me, and then they said, and yes, I probably don't have a life because it took hours. So anyway, then I walked out into the audience, and I start unrolling this toilet paper. It starts with the Earth forms. A few feet later, the moon forms. And then many, 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 many sheets later, about 50 to 60 feet later, then it says the first bacteria. And then it goes on and on. And then finally, as it gets near the end, and you start getting more life forms, you see that there's literally an explosion of life that occurs, culminating with us at the last sheet. Now, the interesting thing is, Lucy, Australopithecus africanus, 4.4 million years ago, is just about an inch from the end of that paper.
Wow.
Okay? Not even. And dinosaurs were caused to go extinct by the Yucatan Chicxulub event. Okay, what do we call it? We used to call it KT boundary, now the Cretaceous Paleogene. They have different names. But that event, 65 million years ago, that wiped out the dinosaurs, is about 2 feet away from the end. So you look at the 117 feet of this toilet paper, and all the life seems to be focused right down in the end where we are. And now you look at that and you say, wow, dinosaurs were a recent event.
Yeah.
They weren't ancient history. They were part of this explosion of life. And now you see how all the many different directions and roads that evolution took to form these different life forms. It's amazing because it opens your eyes, it opens your mind, it allows you to see how we're just one chance animal that rose to prominence on this planet. It didn't have to happen. If dinosaurs weren't made extinct, then perhaps no other intelligent life form would ever have arisen, but perhaps there would. You know, perhaps
dinosaurs would have become super intelligent.
As some theropods were actually becoming intelligent at the time of the extinction. Yes. Yeah, there were certain raptors that were actually, increasing cranial capacity dramatically at the time of the event. So could they have become intelligent? We don't know. But had they become intelligent and had we been in a different world where we knew nothing else, then I'd be sitting here maybe with yellow eyes and a long tail, talking to you about the same stuff we're talking about. And this is all we ever understood, was we have dinosaur tails and scales and feathers, and that was what we are.
See, Mark, I should be concentrating on the interview right now, but all I can think about is it Jim Henson's Dinosaurs TV show that used to be on?
Yeah, right.
That's what I'm thinking of right now.
That's funny.
That could be us. That probably is us in an alternate dimension, I guess. Speaking of that stuff, right? And there's Mark, there's so much that I want to talk to you about because I've still got questions.
Sorry. I don't mean to be taking you away from this.
Dude, it's brilliant because I've still got questions on the moon. I still want to talk about the Akubi airdrive. We've still got so much more to talk to you about. So you're coming back for a star. But that's going to have to happen
no
at
worries.
some point. But let's go back to the moon, right? I had a conversation a few years ago with NASA Scientist of the Year 2015, I think he was. Phil Metzger was the chap's name, and he was particularly involved in regolith and looking at the moon and stuff like this. And I got involved in a conversation on Twitter where he was talking. Somebody was chastising him for his idea that we should mine the moon, and I was like, well, why not mine the moon? It's a better place than mining Earth. It looks a lot better if it's on the backside of the moon than it does, down here. But he was talking about these ideas of how they're going to do it. They're talking about, sending sort of, I guess, robots up there that can self-replicate. Like the drones that we discussed. They can find things on the lunar surface. They can, begin to sort of process that sort of stuff, 3D print themselves some new materials and carry on. And we can explore the asteroid belt and stuff like this. One of the things that gets me about the moon, and it comes back to the idea about regolith and particularly the sharpness of that regolith and also the danger of it. I said to him, we spend all of our time on Earth building rockets that are 350 feet long that have ridiculous amounts of propellant just to leave Earth's gravity. Yet we are already on a technological precipice, really, where we could go to the moon and actually build the first ever proper spacecraft, in a sense that it doesn't need to have 350 feet worth of propellant in order to get away from an atmosphere, because ultimately, or to escape gravity, because ultimately we're building it almost in zero G, aren't we? Is that possible? Is that a future of humanity that is almost around the corner, that we could go to the moon and really begin to build craft that could take us to the end of the solar system, at the very least?
Well, I'll tell you this. I believe that it is possible. And then you have to ask, but why would you do it? And the answer to why you would do it is for the following reason. Eventually, our sun is going to die. It's going to run out of hydrogen, and when it does, it's going to begin to shrink. And when it does, helium will start to burn. And when it does, it will expand again into this big red giant, and it will envelop definitely Mercury, definitely Venus, and maybe the Earth. And that's the end of the Earth. Now, oddly enough, at that point, Titan might be actually more habitable as a small planet-like thing, but that'll be very alien still for many millions of years. So for hundreds of millions of years, it might survive. But the fact is, we have to get off this planet
if we want to survive.
How do we do that? Well, as a species. Now, we don't think in terms of global commitment yet. Okay, there are certain things we do that are global commitment. Okay, well, we don't want the globe to warm up. Well, you know what? As much as the science is in, it's not. Okay, there's a lot of science that says, well, no, actually, the Earth's not warming. It's just the climate's changing. And there was a subtle change you saw in the press where it went from global warming to climate change. It's right? It was global warming for a long time, and then it became climate change. There's a reason. It's because they couldn't find the actual scientific, vetted scientific data that showed that it was actually warming globally on this planet. So, as much as we know so little. And we're looking at short-term lifespans that we have and trying to make long-term pronouncements about how the planet works. And you know what? It doesn't work. Is the Earth warming? Well, actually, we're coming out of we just came out of we're post-glacial right now. We just came out of a glacial age.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as you just said, Mark, I mean, with your toilet roll sort of analogy, that how can we make pronouncements about what's happened on the Earth before when we've only been on the Earth for such a small part of its history?
Well, yes, there's
for us to do
there is a fossil record that we have, but guess what? There aren't fossils.
4%, isn't it? The fossil record is about 4% of what was alive.
Well, we only know 4% of the universe in general, right? But we don't have fossils for the vast majority of the life forms that may have lived on this planet, because some of them were soft-bodied and don't leave any kind of record. I mean, there's no way. So there's a lot of life that we don't know about that occurred and left and arose and died out on this planet. Now, does that mean that perhaps, say, an extraterrestrial species may have come here at some point? Possibly. It's possible that happened. I don't discount that possibility. I think that it's fairly probable if you consider the oxygen discussion we had earlier, which I stated that if you want to find life that breathes oxygen, just look for another planet that has oxygen, because it doesn't like to be in the atmosphere, as we said. So that said, it's possible that they're here. It's possible that they're tooling around deep in our oceans. I mean, after all, whether on the moon, hiding on the moon, or deep in our oceans, those are places that anyone who watches us knows we're not there. We only have a very limited presence in both places, even more so limited on the moon. So if you want to set up a observational post, well, you can set it up on the moon. But then you say, well, wait a minute. I've got this lunar reconnaissance orbiter that's orbiting the moon, and I can go onto the LRO website and get a hold of what's called the quick map. And I can look at every spot on that moon down to 0.5 meter per pixel in size. So anything on the moon that's created by another technology would have to be fully disguised. It would not be able to be anything that's like a dome or a hidden spaceship sitting on the moon, because we'd see it. I mean, let's face it, okay? We do know the moon like the back of our hand now. Well, even better than you'll know the oceans.
An argument that maybe they could actually just tune into our if there were ships kind of going around, they wouldn't need to park permanently, because they could just tune into our own network, tune into our satellites, and just view us through our own eyes.
That's a very possible thing. I mean, I'm not even sure that creatures like that, beings like that, might even recognize what an optical telescope is. They might not even know. That might be foreign to them. They might not even know what it does. They might see the shiny mirror if they looked inside of it, but they'd have to get close to it to do that. And they would have to have ways of hiding themselves. So maybe they study our vehicles up in orbit. It's possible. I'd start with our geostationary satellites. They're over 22,000 miles out.
Yeah, these are on the Lagrange points, aren't they? So they're like deep into the solar system.
Well, they're at a 22,000 mile orbit where they have to be that far away so that their orbital speed matches the rotation speed of the Earth. So they always appear to be over the same spot on the Earth when looking at them from the Earth. You can photograph geosynchronous satellites, actually. A neat thing to do if you have a telescope or a telephoto, or high quality telephoto, is you aim your camera at a certain spot in the sky and take an exposure of, say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes. The stars will trail.
Yeah.
Okay. But the geosynchronous satellite won't, because it's over the same spot.
If I go quiet, I'm looking at old time-lapse photographs that I've taken of the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's we discussed this when you were talking about on the live stream and capturing images of distant nebula and galaxies and stuff like this.
Yeah.
If you take a long exposure for 10 or 15 minutes, you're going to get that track of the stars, like the trail of the stars, aren't you, being dragged across the sky? But
yes,
what you do is
if you're not
stack
using
those images, using short time lapses.
Yeah, that's right. But if you were to take a 10-minute exposure, and it's called an unguided exposure, like you basically turn the telescope off, don't let it track the stars. Okay, as the stars rotate out from move out from under your telescope, if there's a geosynchronous satellite in that orbital, in that view, it's going to show up as a little point of light.
It's going to stay like a star.
Right. It's gonna stay there and be. They wobble a little bit in their orbit, so it'll be a little bit of a sort of a odd shape. It'll be a little like a seagull, a curlicue or a squiggle, but it'll be generally in the same area. They do wobble in their orbit a little bit, and if you take a picture of them, you'll see the stars going by, but the satellites are staying right there. I mean, that's the easiest way to see them.
Mark,
by far.
Does this blow the flat Earth idea? Clean out the water.
Oh, you know what? Yes. Unfortunately, I've had many discussions with people who believe in the flat Earth, and I have to admit, a few years ago, I actually was in Los Angeles at another event, another conference that I had to talk at, and as I landed, I had to go on the air and speak about to a flat Earth guy. Now, I had nothing prepared because I didn't know what to expect. All right. Well, this guy cleaned my clock. Now, it's not that I didn't have the facts to back it up. It's that I kind of lost my cool. And when you lose your cool, you lose your intelligence. That's how I put it. Okay.
Yeah.
And so he cleaned my clock, and deservedly so. No, he was totally wrong about them being a flat Earth. Absolutely wrong. But you know what? He won that battle, or that fight. And the reason was because I lost my cool. So now I don't lose my cool anymore. And whenever I hear about flat Earth, when people want to talk about flat Earth, I'm very calm and collected. And I say little things like, well, how do you explain the fact that in a flat Earth scenario, right, the sun approaches you and then it kind of recedes from you? If that's the case, the sun should be getting larger as it's approaching and gets smaller as it's receding. Well, how come it doesn't do that? And, you hear crickets because there's no response. They have no answer to that. They can only kind of stutter and like put their hands over their mouth and kind of mumble a little bit. They don't really know how to answer that question, unfortunately. And you see, I'm already going down that path of, making them sound like idiots. But some of them are actually very smart people.
Absolutely.
Who I think science has failed.
Crazy people.
No, I think science has failed them. And I know the Earth isn't flat for many, many reasons. The concept of a sunrise and a sunset. When the sun rises, it comes up above what? A horizon. Why is it coming up above? Because the Earth is rotating toward it. Okay. Why does it leave? Well, the Earth is rotating away from it. It goes below the horizon. It's actually moving below the limb of the Earth. Now, that said, when it does that, you also see something else. On the opposite side where the sun is rising from or setting from, you see this dark band that has a little bit of a reddish band above it. Okay, that dark band that you're seeing as the sun sets further and further, that dark band goes up in the sky higher and higher. What are you seeing? You're seeing the shadow of the Earth.
Yeah.
And that shadow is being projected out into space, into the atmosphere, obviously.
Off the atmosphere, yeah.
Yeah. And you see it as a dark area. All right. And this is right there. That's proof, tantamount, total proof that the Earth is round, a sphere. But, they have these explanations for them. They talk about holograms, and the moon isn't really round. It's a hologram, and it's only a few thousand miles away. The sun is only a few thousand miles away. And, then you say, well, what do you say to that? Well, I guess Venus and Mercury have to be only a few thousand miles away because they have phases just like the moon. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't true, but they are. You can see the phase of Venus without any problem in a reasonable telephoto even. So
I was going to say, I mean, it goes retrograde, doesn't it? So it moves effectively backwards within the sky, which pretty much proves that we're kind of both all circulating the same thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, and people like to talk about, Ptolemy's epicycles, and they talk about ways in which, all the, retrograde motion can occur. But it doesn't change the fact that the actual layout of the solar system is a central sun, and the planets around the sun. And how do we know that? Well, if you don't want to believe everything here in our solar system, well, exoplanet science brings you that answer, because we can actually detect orbits of planets that are many light years away.
I was going to say, this is exactly what we're doing, isn't it? Using telescopes, we're mapping the transits, we're mapping the lack of sun, I guess, or the sun being blocked out by a planet passing in front of it, and we're able to work out how far away it is from the planet and its density, and because we're working out how long it's taken to go around its parent star. So we'll see it again in another 365 days, whatever it is, and it'll dip again, and we go, there's another transit. We know its orbit is 365 days, just like Earth. And then the things that you were talking about earlier, in terms of the way we look through the atmosphere and the way the sun's light that comes through the atmosphere will change in different chemical composition, shows us then what the atmosphere may be made of, and therefore what the planet also may be made of, and its potential for habitable life and stuff. So there's so much evidence out there, isn't it? It's fascinating stuff. But I agree with you. I think that, there's some incredibly intelligent people who have kind of bought into this idea. And I think it's ultimately because science probably, as you say, has probably failed them in some way.
I think it has. But the other thing I think is also that folks like this, sometimes their motivation is to just be that fly in the ointment. Sometimes they want trouble. Okay. Sometimes they just want to foment, they'll call it discussion, but it's like, well, then why you mean having discussion? I mean, there was, and one of the flat earthers actually had a quote unquote scientist who was a very smart woman, but she actually was saying that the molecules in the air don't actually scatter blue light to create the blue sky. But we know that it does for a fact. I mean, we can demonstrate this in a lab. We can also see it in the sky when looking at the sky and analyzing the spectrum of our own sky, but I mean, even smart people sometimes go off the rails. And I like I said, at that discussion where I was trying to debate this flat earth guy, okay, I went off the rails. That was my doing. It was my fault. Okay. I lost fair and square. The guy had me dead to rights because I didn't know where this was going to go. And I didn't want to, engage with him on a discussion because I just thought it was ludicrous. But rather than be ludicrous about it, I think it's important to be educational about it now. And I'd rather tell people why I don't believe that's the case, and then let them make their own mind up. I don't need everybody to agree with me when I walk away. I just want to make sure they have the information, and then they can do with it what they will. I can't make people believe anything. You know what I mean? So, but that's how it is, right? I mean, the Earth, the Earth is a very interesting planet. It has a lot of history to it, and after it's gone, we're gonna miss it. But
that's an understatement.
Yeah, but by that time, we're also going to be full colonists on perhaps a nearby solar system, because we will have perfected the Alcubierre drive that you were mentioning earlier.
Do you know, I've literally this second just Googled it, because this is my next question.
Yeah, no, go for it. I mean, that's the thing. Okay, the question is, okay, if an intelligent species has made it to here, to this planet, how could they get here?
Yes.
Aren't the stars very far away? And the answer is yes, they are. So how do you shorten that distance? Well, it's a certain distance. It's 4.3 light years, okay, to the nearest star besides the sun.
Alpha Centauri.
Right? And that's right. Alpha Centauri is actually a triple star system, right? You have the A and B components, and then C is Proxima. Okay, they go A, B, and C, capital letters.
Yeah.
So C Centauri is Alpha Centauri C is actually Proxima Centauri, and that we found a little planet around that star. Interestingly enough. Now, let's suppose we wanted to go there. So we aim a rocket, our best performing rocket, and we send it off into space. We accelerate to the highest possible speed we've ever done, using gravity to assist us, whip around Jupiter, and zoom out of the solar system, head toward Alpha Centauri. and we'll get to Proxima in how long, moving at the highest speed we've ever moved. It'll take us about 19,000 years.
Okay.
Oh,
so that's a generational project right there.
Practical. Generational? That's civilizational, if you want to go that way. I mean,
it's beyond that.
Right? Think where we were 19,000 years ago.
Imagine
okay, think about the
I
case here, right?
A third of the way there, 5,000 years in, we could have rose and fall on a number of occasions. And changed our science. We're like, we need to stop off. We're going to rebuild this because we can get there way quicker now. But dude, we can't stop off. We're on it, you know?
Over 3 times the time to ancient Sumeria, okay, it would take us to get there. Now, I think that it's important to understand that there are better ways. And how do we do that? We have to fool the universe. We have to circumvent the speed limit in the universe, which is 186,000 miles per second, which is the speed limit. That's the speed of light. It's 7 times around the Earth in a second. Seems fast, but even at that speed, it takes the light from Alpha Centauri, A, B, and C, 4.3 light years to get here. I'm sorry, 4.3 years to get here. And that's why it's called a light year. It's the distance light travels in a year. So that's quite a distance. So how do we bridge that gap? Well, in the 90s, 1994, Miguel Alcubierre came up with this concept. It was a tensor, actually, a mathematical description of a warp drive. Now, it was kind of he called it a warp drive, sort of out of deference to Gene Roddenberry, and because he may or may not have been a Trekkie fan, but people that worked with him probably were, and they became warp drive and it stuck. Well, anyway, the idea was that you could have a ship and it would have this ring around it, this toroidal ring that would go around it, and that ring could generate something called a warp bubble. Now, a warp bubble is a concept in mathematics. It's not an actual thing. We don't see any in nature. We haven't ever seen any in nature, but we know that it can be constructed. Just like we don't see rockets in nature, but we knew they could be constructed.
Yeah, it's theoretically possible, basically.
That's right. Yeah. So so the Alcubierre drive then is based on the fact that this warp bubble creates this environment which separates you, in effect, from the universe's limits. Now, how does that happen? It happens because what you do in the warp bubble is, rather than you speeding to another destination, you're not moving anywhere. And what you do is you induce the movement in the universe to go speeding by you. And now, just store that for one moment, because I know that sounds odd, because you're going to immediately think, well, then when someone goes in the warp drive with the Alcubierre drive, shouldn't we all hit the wall at high rate of speed because they're yanking our universe? And the answer is that no, and I'll tell you why in a sec. But when someone activates that warp drive, what happens is they actually are pulling the universe past them as fast as they can, effectively. They're contracting the distance between them and their destination, and that lengthens the distance between them and their origin, where they left from. Now, imagine a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, and you fold up the opposite corners to almost touch each other. That's, in a sense, what an Alcubierre drive is. Okay, where those points of the paper meet, that's the distance now that you have to actually traverse in space. All right, it's a tiny little gap. And then you turn off your generator that warps space, and it all unfolds again. And now you're there. You're on that other point. Okay, you've circumvented the speed of light. And as odd as it sounds, Miguel Alcubierre came up with this concept, and he said, look, to generate a warp bubble, we can do it with this geometry of this ship, but it would need the energy that's the equivalent of converting the planet Jupiter, an entire mass of Jupiter, into energy. It's a colossal amount of energy that we, or probably even an advanced civilization, wouldn't waste their time on, because it's so high. The requirements and the resources are so high. So it was shelved as a thought problem. Everybody said, wow, that's cool, and left it for a while, until someone, a team, actually, I think his last name is White, down at NASA. He reworked the actual shape of the geometry on that ring, and he realized that you could reduce the energy requirement, because again, Miguel Alcubierre came up with the first blush attempt at an Alcubierre drive, right? That's warp drive. So they came up with a new concept that basically said, whoa, hey, I've just reshaped this toroidal ring here, and by reshaping it, I've reduced the energy requirement by 10 to the 26th power. And it's like, oh wait, what?
What?
Yeah,
What?
yeah, and that means, okay, in terms that we can all understand, not the mass of Jupiter converted to energy, but something the size of the Voyager spacecraft converted to energy.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay, now that's more palatable. Okay, and that's why NASA has a lab investigating the Alcubierre Drive right now.
I was going to say, because this made it feasible, didn't it?
It made it, well, it's still not feasible for us, but it will be feasible with certain developments that will come down the pike.
Yeah.
We know that, that's going to work for us. We know that it can work. We see it on our horizon. It's inexorable. It's coming toward us. We know that we can do this. So we will do this. It's a technology that's in existence, mentally, and it can be put into a physical development. Now, it means
Marc,
maybe in...
I was going to say it's very much like the Wright brothers in a sense. If it's in our mindset, if it's in our mind's eye, if we know that we can do it, it's just a step away. It's just like flight, isn't it? Yeah,
well, only birds can fly. Humans will never fly. How many times have the Wright brothers heard that? They heard that quite a lot.
Exactly.
Well, yes, exactly so. And it'll be impossible until it's not. I like to say that too. It'll be impossible until it's not. And so, and those are kind of like contradictory terms, and they're supposed to be, because, a lot of people will say, well, we could never go interstellar. The gulf is so big. Okay, change the gulf, make the distance smaller. Oh, okay. And that'll work. Yes. Now it'll work. All right. Now, there's even some theoretical work on how to create a warp bubble. Now, what is this warp bubble? It's just an area that surrounds a ship that actually allows you to monkey with what we call the fabric of space-time.
Yeah,
fabric of space-time?
You're going to step outside of time. You're going to step out of the confines of gravity and not be subject to the universe in which we live at the moment. Is then that technically interdimensional travel?
Well, not in the truest sense, okay? Because but you're changing with gravity, the force of gravity. You're changing the fabric of space. That is to say, how space acts due to your presence of your field. And that's not necessarily changing dimensions, but it is it's working within the same dimensions, but it's working at a more in a more confined space, because you actually fold space in a sense. Okay, it doesn't, you're still in the same space, but you're folding it. Now, that very problem, okay, what you just said creates a problem. Okay, it creates a problem, because if we're going to Alpha Centauri and we are moving and we're going to get there, say, in 5 days, because that is, by the way, the theoretical speed can get us there in 5 days. 5 days to go 4.3 light years. But at what cost? Well, as you're warping space, what happens is your warp bubble accumulates a lot of highly charged particles on it. Okay, and between the Earth and Alpha Centauri, you're folding space, so you're just jumping that little gulf, but you've also built up this massive amount of charged particles. It's more so, okay, if you're going to do it in a therefore, you say, I'm going in 5 days because I got to be back, because I got to watch the Green Bay Packers game on Sunday. Okay, and I want to be back in time. Okay, Phil, let's just go. All right, so we go. You get to Alpha Centauri, you turn off the drive, and you see this, you're there, bam, now you're there, you see Proxima Centauri, you see the dwarf star, and you see this planet, and you see this massive space station complex and all kinds of spacecraft, and you're looking at it for a split second, and you turn to the other guy, and you say, wow, this is an advanced species, and all of a sudden, this light blinds you, and the entire solar system and the star are gone.
Boom.
They're blown away. Why?
Is this passing the light cone?
Well, no. What happens is, like bugs on a windshield, going and transporting yourself to Alpha Centauri in this way, it builds up a lot of this energy, this phenomenal, astronomical, unbelievable, universal quantity of energy on this warp bubble. And when you dissolve the warp bubble, it radiates out in all directions. You may survive, but it's literally enough energy to destroy the entire solar system and possibly even the star. Now, you'll turn to the guy you just saw the civilization with on your ship, and you'll say, let's tell him we didn't see a thing. Yeah, exactly. Okay, nothing to see here.
Get back in the craft and fire it up. Let's go.
What about we didn't even
Bears,
huh? Yeah. Well,
how about the football game Sunday?
Yeah, game's on Sunday.
Exactly, yeah. Let's just tell him we didn't find anything. Yeah, nothing to see here. Let's just go home. Yeah, nothing. There was nobody here. Yeah,
anyway,
we saw the stars
how's
gone.
That game?
Where's the star gone?
Exactly.
We don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It just gone. We got here. So
essentially, it's kind of creates sort of a devastating amount of energy.
Yes, that's true, and it could be used as a weapon. It could be used as a weapon. I mean, if you were angry at an alien civilization and you were an advanced civilization, you'd send an Alcubierre bomb, and you would end up detonating it and destroying their homeworld and everything else. But I have a feeling that the fact that we don't see these types of explosions, we can recognize when certain stars go supernova. We know that they do, and we know the remnants and what they are. But the fact that we don't see these all the time means either one of two things: either there's no civilizations out there, which I don't believe, or two, that any civilizations that do exist do have a morality code, which again, it's not guaranteed. They don't have to be moral. I mean, if you look at the abduction cases, that so forth, there's anything but morality in some of these. They're just clinical, like robots, which is what I think they are, biological robots. But and then there's a third option. There is an option that maybe they saw the Alcubierre technique and just went right past it to interdimensional, because Alcubierre is actually slow. As fast as it is for us, it's slow. It's like going the speed of sound was fast, but orbiting in orbit around the Earth at 17,500 miles an hour is faster by so much more. And so when you compare the two, it's night and day. There's no comparison. Now, that said, maybe an alien civilization saw this possibility and possibly said, well, using that travel, boy, we'd have to go to, and let's put them in our place. We'd have to go to Alpha Centauri in like 3 weeks to make it so that we can bleed off the excess energy on that warp bubble and make it palatable. And that's 3 weeks to the nearest star. But my gosh, we want to go across the galaxy. If you did that with the Alcubierre drive, as fast as it could go, it's still going to take you an astronomical amount of time to actually do this. So yes, that's great, and okay, we'll investigate it, and we'll use it for the planets, to actually get to the planets in a few days in our solar system. But how about if we just go right past this and go into this interdimensional travel realm, and that way we can just do that. And I'm guessing that that's the speed, because that's the thing that's going to get the speed, because if you use that process, you can actually punch out of our X, Y, and Z, all moving through time, our 4 dimensions, punch out and punch in to another spot anywhere in the universe in some discrete amount of time. Now, that's a darn sight better. That's like having a tricycle, all right, compared to a dragster, and say, which one would you across the country in? Would you like to go in the tricycle or on the dragster or the jet plane, say? And obviously you say, well, the jet, of course. Okay, so maybe an alien civilization came up with that and faced that issue. So now they picked the interdimensional travel realm and left the Alcubierre drive to say local works. That's possible. And I just find that the concept of thinking that an Alcubierre drive is actually too slow is something that's mind-boggling, because it's too slow, and we need a lot more speed. So we do have to go into string theory. We do have to dive into this interdimensional travel. And if my friend Bob Schroeder is right in solving the UFO enigma, I believe that then he would agree that that's probably the methodology of travel, and that means that an advanced alien species is not only advanced, but they're also the greatest cartographers in the universe.
Yeah, could you imagine? Wow.
They mapped every entry and exit point. And they're not wormholes. We're not talking about wormholes here. Okay, wormholes are something in our dimensional space. Okay, we're not talking about wormholes. We're talking about interdimensional travel that's different from anything that we've actually experienced. So I think down the line, we'll be going down that path because we already see it on our horizon. We can see that we can do that.
Yeah, we're looking at we're looking at the sky again and the birds, thinking we're coming. You know, we're going to do this too, aren't we?
That's right. I want to fly like a bird. Okay, we did. I want to go to the moon. Okay, we did. I want to go to Mars. Okay, we did. I want to go to Pluto. Oh, we did. It took 15 years. All right. Now with the Alcubierre drive, it'd be a fun exercise to figure out at what realistic speed we could get to Pluto in. Okay, it took 15 years, a bunch of gravity whips, and a bunch of cruising. But perhaps if we just went straight, to where Pluto will be, in the amount of time it takes us to get there, maybe instead of 15 years, maybe it would only take about 4 days, 7 days, or 8 days.
So, I mean, this would make us instantly straight away a type 1 civilization, wouldn't it? I guess in some respects, or in
some respects it would. That's right. We'd have to have the amount of energy that a type 1 civilization would have to have, and maybe even a type 2. But we're about 300 years from type 1. Do you know?
I wanted to ask you an hour ago about Tabby's star. We haven't even got that far yet.
Yeah.
But I find this stuff fascinating. The way I've been describing this kind of technology at the minute to my friends. And I use this analogy of a pond skater. We're like the pond skater on this film, of space time in a sense. We're too light to break through it, but underneath us exists this other world, this water, and above us exists another world. This air. And I guess what the Alcubierre drive does is it kind of pushes, using this toroidal force, like I say, it pushes on space, which is quite rigid, and kind of softens it, doesn't it? Allowing us to bend it and to move it, to roll down it almost, or to pull it underneath us like a rug. So. Which I find absolutely amazing, really. But is then this kind of Alcubierre drive the way in which we leave space-time? Is this the way in which the pond skater punches a hole through that membrane and is able to swim under the water, in almost no gravity or no time, if you will?
Well, it's I don't know if water's the right analogy, but I get your point, and that's actually a good one. If it's not. I believe that with the Alcubierre drive, you're looking at working within the same dimensional space.
Yeah.
But you're just folding it. And yes, it doesn't like to be folded. Thus, it takes a lot of energy to do so. So if you fold the space, you're just jumping across the folds. Now, it's like if there's two wave crests and the waves are lapping up, and there's two wave crests that they come close together. Now, if you rode all the way down the wave into the trough and up the other side to that wave crest, that's a certain distance. But if you just jumped from the top crest to the other crest, maybe you went about a foot, whereas it would have gone about 7 feet, say, to do the other path. That's the concept. But at no time do you leave the air. You're still in the air when you do that on a wave. And in the same way, the Alcubierre drive would be the same in space. You're still in that area, but the warp drive, the warp bubble, is what's doing the folding of the space that's around you. Now, here's the interesting part. Because you're doing that warping, and because you're going and compressing this distance, everything inside the warp bubble, it's as if it's not moving. You don't feel anything. Okay? And on the outside, when space warps, you don't feel you're suddenly shift toward it. Like a styrofoam cork bobbing on a lake would, in a big wave. You don't feel a wave crest. Oh, here we go again. Someone's warping away. You don't feel that, right? And it has to do with something called reference frames.
Yeah.
And the fact that within the reference frame of the observer, us on the Earth, the Alcubierre ship's up in orbit, and it's about to leave. All right. As it goes into its warp, it bends space. Now, what happens to us? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. It doesn't affect us. Now, but in the ship, they notice that space all around them is being warped. All right. And Alpha Centauri becomes closer and they jump across the gap. Most likely there'll be a number of jumps, to do this in these early drives when they finally actually do come to fruition. It'll probably be a number of crest to crest jumps that they actually make But here on Earth, we would just see it just sort of like and be gone. It's like, whoa, it just disappeared. And and that's because it folded space and then jumped to the next crest, or just stepped over to the next crest. So maybe it has a little energy of its own, where or however that works, and it goes to the next crest, and then bam, shuts off the gravity generator, lets everything cool down, whatever it takes, And now it's out by, I don't know, it's out by the Oort cloud or something, Who knows? But it's going to be that kind of thing. And these jumps will be accumulating energy, and so they have to be dissipated, and that's probably why they'll have to do it either in 3 weeks' time, because they're going to have to jump many times.
You're also going to have to keep the dissipation or the amount of energy that's built up less enough to not rip a hole in space-time. But then by the
your ship.
Or your ship. But I guess, like, ultimately, if you were to do long-distance jumps, you'd almost have to jump into a dead space. So if that dissipation of energy was likely to be cataclysmic for whatever's close by, you'd have to jump to something, a relatively dead space quite far away, and then traverse at a slower speed to the location almost, wouldn't you?
Actually, that's what I was saying, is that most likely when we make contact with an interstellar race, it'll be in deep space, because if we warp drive to their location using Alcubierre's concept, they will see us coming, and they will come out to greet us. They're not going to wait for us to show up on their planet and say, "Whoa, hey, Marge, did you invite these guys? They look really weird. Come on in. There's enough splignac for the rest of you." What?
They've got oxygen on their planet. Oxygen.
Can you believe it? They
actually breathe oxygen. They're so
They're
weird.
Mouth breathers. Don't invite those mouth breathers into this house. So no, it's. I don't think that it's gonna. It's not going to actually exit our dimensional space at all. It's just going to jump from crest to crest within it. And it'll be bending the fabric that is space-time. And, the whole concept of fabric and space-time, boy, that's an hour-long discussion.
I was going to say, that is a whole show in itself, isn't it?
And it's going to lose a lot of people anyway, so I wouldn't ever do that. Never. Don't ever do that.
See, I'm fascinated by it, and I know a lot of our listeners are, but my goodness, it's a rabbit hole. Pardon the pun.
It's a big rabbit hole.
It's a massive rabbit hole.
And we've just talked about Alcubierre Drive, okay? And we didn't even talk about any of the physics associated with it. We just talked about what happens in this compression and extension, obviously, of space. And we make a concept, we'd say something, the fabric of space is warped and bent. Do you know how many assumptions that persons listening to this have to make, before they to accept that? They have to make all these assumptions that what we're saying makes sense. And they're thinking, well, if it makes sense to these guys, I'll assume it makes sense to me. But I don't want people to stop there. I'd love for them to go out and look up more information about the Alcubierre Drive, learn about its possibilities, and a little bit more about how this warp bubble works. But I warn you, you rapidly get into these tensors and other mathematical constructs that will lose you. But at least you'll have a foundation for understanding what's going on with the drive and why it's too slow. Okay. But it's a great start. If we want to colonize the solar system, if we want to mine the moon, if we want to mine the asteroid belt especially, then this is a great way to get out and back. All right. We just have to make sure that we do it in a way that doesn't obliterate anything at either end.
I was going to say, I mean, it's a short distance. I was going to say, short distance travel, isn't it? Is what it seems to be about. Very fast, but shorter distances, so we don't build that amount of energy that basically carves a hole in the middle of the universe.
Right, or you go the long distances in multiple jumps, as I said. So you go and stop, go and stop, go and stop. But everywhere you stop, okay, you just make sure you're not near a star. Well, you won't be if you're just going to Alpha Centauri. Make sure you're not near anything in interstellar space that could be a problem. Because when you jump again and you go to warp space-time, I mean, if you're near any kind of a errant rogue planet that's out in the middle of space or whatever, that could end your trip real fast, as Han Solo would say. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot to do, a lot of science and a lot of engineering, a lot of understanding of space and interstellar space especially. There's a lot of dust in space, a lot of dust. There's charged particles.
I always think
around,
this.
especially.
I always think this, thinking if you're trying to travel from one space to another, like how are you going to avoid small meteorites, large objects? I'm guessing I mean, obviously with things like the QB drive, that bubble would almost take you out of space time, so you wouldn't be subject to the same sort of physicalities of space as we know it, would you? I guess, but it's interesting, isn't it? You know, you often watch it on Star Wars or Star Trek, and you think they're traveling from point A to point B. How are they not hitting stuff? You know, that's in the way.
Yeah, well, obviously, you know, there's and we're doing the same thing, aren't we? I mean, we're avoiding all those complications just to be able to discuss the concepts. And I know that if you talk about you know, like Star Wars and Star Trek, science fiction per se, we know that science fiction does often become science fact. And I'm convinced that our brains can't think of anything that's actually impossible. Yeah, I believe that we can't think of impossible things. I believe that we can only think of the things that are possible, but we don't know the limits because that's not something that we're privy to. We don't have that understanding of the universe to the point where we would understand that, well, the universe didn't make this species capable of doing this, you know, X, Y, and Z here, but it made them capable of doing, you know, A, B, and C, you know, but we don't know that. We don't know any of that stuff yet. So, I mean, the future is going to hold plenty for us, and there's going to be a lot of development to come, you know, and I'm just fascinated. I start, you know, here at home when the Sky Tour live stream, I try to show people the deep sky and take them on clear night tours, you know, and, you know, we have our crater club. We create these 3D printed craters. People can order their favorite crater. It doesn't have to be a specific one. They can tell us which one they want, you know. So I'm keeping it all, you know, light and airy and home here. And you can get Mars craters. You can get even Pluto. I've got landscapes I've printed of Pluto. Fascinating stuff from New Horizons, that probe that took 15 years to get there. Yet when it flew by Pluto, it couldn't stop because it was already going too fast. So it would have had to turn around at midpoint and start, you know, firing thrusters if it had any in the opposite direction to slow down, or use gravity of other planets. But there weren't any planets near it at the time that could slow it down. You know, they could be used to like do, you know, any kind of braking maneuvers. So,
I mean, its mission, isn't it, is to head out to the Oort cloud and start mapping some of these larger objects in the Oort cloud, wasn't it? So they've kind of selected 3 targets now, haven't they, to go and visit while they're out there?
In the Kuiper Belt, you mean?
Yeah, in the Kuiper Belt. Sorry, that's what I meant. The Oort cloud, yeah, that's even further away.
It is, yeah. But, you know, in the Oort clouds where they think comets may be. Now, we talked about that collision of the Andromeda Galaxy with the Milky Way Galaxy in several, you know, long time in the future. Well, when that happens, one of the things that could happen is that some of these new stars that are entering our galaxy as we enter their galaxy, as we start to merge, some of those stars could pass close to our Oort cloud and dislodge many comets, taking some with it, but sending many toward us, perhaps. Maybe changing their orbits such that they end up heading into the inner solar system over time. And if that were to happen, that'll come at a time when we will be able to defend ourselves against incoming rogue asteroids or comets, because that's something, you know, we're sitting ducks right now, and we have been since our inception. So we have a long way to go there, but that's technology that we have to implement, isn't it? We have to protect ourselves so we can survive long enough. You know, I mean, luckily we have that awareness. You know, when we were, you know, Lucy and other primates in Olduvai Gorge, for instance, running around, all we cared about was food and shelter and predators. Okay, if they looked up in the sky, they didn't know what they were looking at, and they never even thought about it. Probably wasn't on their minds at all, perhaps. But that said, they never thought about the potential threats to their lives, and so that's something now we have an awareness of, and we track incoming asteroids. You know, with a Goldstone radar array that actually tracks and maps asteroids that are near Earth asteroids, but it can't see all of them. You know, so that's something that has to, you know, be dealt with, and that's hopefully what we'll help with, you know, down the line with our systems. But the truth is, you know, at least we're societally aware of threats from space. Because we have to be aware of threats from space.
We take it seriously a little bit more now. We certainly seem to be taking it seriously. I think we've kind of realized we're in this cosmic shooting gallery, and that actually we've been exceptionally fortunate to have made it this far without some sort of cataclysmic event. I mean, you look back to 1908, the Tunguska blast.
Yeah.
You mentioned the sort of the one that destroyed the dinosaurs, the Chicxulub crater, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah,
but,
Chicxulub, yeah.
Chicxulub. We've had some close calls. I mean, you mentioned the moon and the crater that's on the moon. I believe the moon has got the second largest crater in the solar system, hasn't it? So to all intents and purposes, that bad boy took a bullet for us.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing we've got this.
And in
far.
fact, it's near the South Pole on the far side.
Yeah, that's the one.
You know,
I thought you mentioned that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mention it today, but I have mentioned it on other shows.
Mm.
Actually, on the P&K space imaging stream, we talked about it. It's the lowest spot on the moon because it was the largest impactor on the moon. It's called the Aitken Basin, Aitken, Aitken Basin. And it's actually it's just around the South Polar area. And it's responsible, for instance, for, it's down near the South Polar, Southern Hemisphere of the moon on the far side. And it's responsible for uplifting mountains all the way up near the moon's equator.
Wow.
Okay. So it was a massive impact. And this all happened, this uplift all occurred in just a few minutes. So you can imagine the amount of energy that it expended, doing that. It was just a massive impact.
I'm guessing the entire surface became molten again as a result of something like that.
If it did, we wouldn't know. We could if we had a little bit more probe time, but it probably didn't, because the impactor probably did localized molten formations, and did certainly make a molten sea on the moon for a period of time at that location, fairly extensive, probably maybe like up to 1,600 miles or more of it on the Aitken Basin, in fact. So, and then that, of course, solidified, and then, of course, later more craters hit and overlaid the ancient sea and so forth, and that's why we see craters on the seas on the near side as well.
Wow.
And another fascinating thing too, that's on the far side. But on the near side, you notice how we have these dark maria, these dark seas.
Yeah.
And the far side, we don't have any, do we? There's none. There's only Mare Moscoviense, which is on the kind of in the northern hemisphere, okay, on one side, and that's the only sea we have, and it's a small one. So why is that? Now, that's another fascinating thing that I've talked about on the streams too, and this relates to us, because at a time when both the Earth and the Moon were still semi-molten. Okay, the Earth had a lot of infrared energy, which is just light, by the way. It's just longer wavelength, right? And it's thermal energy, and it was radiating it toward the Moon. But every time the Moon got struck by a meteor would, splash basically on the Moon, and it would raise up a lot of dust in the exosphere around the Moon, and then the infrared energy would tend to drive it to the far side of the Moon, where it would fall there. Over time, this makes the crust on the far side thicker than the near side. Right. So that's why the near side has more maria than the far side. The far side is a much thicker crust, and thus the Moon is actually lopsided.
I was going to say, it's like a giant potato in space, isn't it? It's like it's almost made out of two halves.
Yeah, it's a strange look, right? And that's just a little astronomical fact. It's something that gets a lot of from the audience when we talk about it. But that's just a theory, by the way, about that radiation pressure pushing that stuff to the far side. But it's in the literature. It's something that they've been investigating and trying to figure out. So I have to admit, it's a very cool possibility.
Mark, 100%. I'm coming on your live stream and having a look at this. I need you to show me around the solar system.
Oh, you should have fun. Yeah, we look at Uranus and Neptune. We look at the Moon too. And whenever we look at the Moon, sometimes Keith from P&K Space Imaging will join me and come on my stream, and talk. And he just likes to listen because he's a technical computer guy, and so he's not an astronomer, but he runs all the technical stuff for Paul, who runs the telescopes in Miami. But when we get together and he talks, he's on the stream with me. He'll be talking about all the stuff that he's interested in with the Moon, and we'll go back and forth. He'll ask me questions. It becomes a real kind of like a little conversation, which is kind of fun. And my co-host on the SkyTour live stream is a woman named Amanda Curran, and Amanda's wonderful. She handles all the questions in chat. I can't see the chat because I'm actually running the telescope. I've got hundreds of pounds of telescope over my head. So I'm running the telescope, I'm operating the dome, I'm running the computer, I'm taking care of the Wi-Fi connection to the telescope, I'm steering it around. I've got only about 6 things that I'm doing when I'm in there. So, and then I'm also talking to people about the things we're looking at and giving them the history of the things and how far they are and all that stuff. So besides trying to be, all things that way to folks, there's one thing I can't do is look at the chat. So Amanda really, really helps with that. She's really phenomenal. She'll bring the questions, and she's live on Skype with me at the same time, and we're broadcasting over YouTube. So, wow. We do this nice little interplay.
Mark,
so it's nice. You guys got to join.
Dude, I'm definitely coming. Me and Chris will come and see you. Yeah. I have enough trouble trying to read messages when I'm running a radio show, let alone running a telescope.
Right. Right.
Mark, dude, we've totally run out of time, though. Totally run over. Tell us a little bit about your websites. Tell us where we can find out more about you, your business, and what are the things that you're involved in.
Sure. I obviously do a lot of talks, but obviously you've heard about the Sky Tour live stream. That's a YouTube channel, Sky Tour live stream with Marc D'Antonio. Join it, subscribe it, subscribe to it, hit the bell, be alerted when I go live on clear nights. We also have 3D printed craters from all over the solar system, from any place you want, landscapes of Pluto, Mars, the Moon, Mercury, Ceres, and even the Earth. So we can 3D print these, and we can make them as a standard or deluxe version where we can put them on a wooden plaque with a brass plate giving you the latitude, longitude, name, diameter of the craters on a wooden plate, wooden plaque with this crater in the center, or just the plate alone. So if you don't want the deluxe, just go for the standard, and you get the standard one. And they're all hand painted, properly to the actual colors. So when you look at the Martian ones, you'll see that there's different tonalities of reddish and brown in certain regions, depending on where we are. And same thing with the moon. The moon is not gray.
Is it like the moon actually a green color, isn't it?
Well, that's cheese.
Or is it brown? No, is it like a browny reddish ochre color or something?
There's whites, there's browns, there's some grays. Yes.
Yeah.
Mostly the overall color we see is gray, but we faithfully reproduce that, and we put that into the ray structure of craters like Copernicus and Tycho. I've got Tycho right in front of me. In fact, it's the latest one I printed. And I'm printing a dune field on Mars today later. So it's going to be a crater with dunes around it that are really cool, scalloped dunes, neat features. So, and these are all, something that, we offer through FX Models. And that's my company, which is a visual effects company. We did a lot of things. I do work on some projects with Doug Trumbull, who's the Academy Award-winning visual effects legend. He did Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He did Blade Runner. He's done all these movies, even 2001: A Space Odyssey with Stanley Kubrick. The man's an outright genius. And when I met him, I was shaking because I couldn't believe it was. I was meeting this man whose work I followed and mimicked, basically learned from for years. And I worked for him. And then next thing you know, I got on a project with him. We were working on a particular commercial, and I was trying to fire this catapult that was going to fire an Oreo cookie. All right. And I was testing the catapult with a wooden puck, and I made the catapult a little too powerful, and I fired it, and it blew a hole in his garage door. That was the first day I met the man.
Wow.
And he came in and said, "Who the hell punched a hole in my garage door?" And his son just immediately pointed at me.
You know it.
And I'm thinking, I am so fired.
Oh, man.
I am so fired. And instead he looked at me and said, "What? You're on the right track. It's just a little too powerful. Tone it down." And he walked out, and I was like, "I am so not fired." And we've been great friends ever since. So, there's a lot of things that, I could say I can't, obviously, with time. But, I do appreciate you guys having me on. Sky Tour live stream, our Crater Club, where we actually give you a crater a month for people that want to subscribe to us.
Brilliant.
And we're putting that all together now. And my Arvada, I have an Arvada, Colorado planet team, people that I set up out there to work with me in my business. And they actually do a lot of work. We do these large planets for businesses all over the world. And we do these craters now as well. So Jude in Colorado is my lead for that team. And she would be the one that people would contact to talk about the craters. But, anything you want, man, we can do it. I just love it. Anything astronomy, I'm in.
Oh,
I tell you.
I'm totally into that. Definitely. Marc D'Antonio, thanks very much for being a brilliant guest today.
Thanks,
for all
guys.
of your information, your great knowledge. Thanks for speaking to us. Dude, we will catch up with you soon because I definitely have lots and more to talk to you about.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. If anyone wants to contact me, they can contact me at info@fxmodels.com, which is my company, FXMODELS.
Awesome. Marc Dantonio on the Asylum. Thank you very much.